Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our short webinar on address-based sampling. Ashley and I are delighted that you could join us. If this is your first time listening to this webinar, again, welcome. And if you were part of the group yesterday, we apologize for the technical difficulties. We hope that this webinar is a timely presentation in light of the fact that the government and many research organizations are struggling with conducting representative surveys to get reliable estimates for infection rates and related statistics for COVID-19. As we will present to you, address-based sampling provides a comprehensive platform for design and administration of scientific surveys that can produce reliable estimates. During this short webinar, we will start with a quick overview of what is address-based sampling. Then Ashley will look under the hood and explain how the sampling frame or the list of addresses that are used for address-based sampling is compiled, how we go about refining that address list and making it suitable for complex surveys. And then we touch upon some of the sampling and administration options and conclude by some considerations for weighting of data from address-based protocol and a couple of conclusions. So briefly, address-based sampling is a method of sample selection and survey administration that relies on the computerized delivery sequence file from the Postal Service. This is a database that USPS uses for mail delivery. It delineates various address types, including residential and business addresses, and it provides address verification, validation, and standardizations. And as a result, it removes undeliverable addresses, as well as the hygiene that it provides increases the speed for mail delivery. It's interesting to note that with the daily feedback from thousands of mail carriers, this database is continuously being updated. But at the same time, it's important to note that ultimately, delivery sequence file is a database of addresses, and it's in its raw form not suitable for sampling and survey applications. For one thing, delivery sequence file is zip-based, as we will explain in more detail, and that means that all the geodemographic information that are available from the census are not available on the address file, and therefore the type of information such as population data that are needed for stratification are not available. But as we will discuss, and this is an important point of this webinar, all the refinements that MSG provides marries a host of information from both public and private sources, so that this simple database of mail delivery is refined and evolved into a comprehensive sampling frame suitable for complex studies. So now I'm going to ask Ashley to give us a bit more information about what is the delivery sequence file and some of its features.
Thank you, Mansour. As Mansour mentioned, CDSF is an address file, but it is a raw address file. But it is the foundation for our address-based frame. So we thought it was important that people understand all the nuances in the address type for sampling purposes, as well as the delivery, various mail delivery aspects of it for survey administration. So here, this slide here will describe how the CDSF is kind of made up. So the CDSF file contains all deliverable addresses. So they are also LAC certified, meaning they go through a locatable address conversion system. Basically, what that does is it converts any unlocatable rural route addresses to city-style addresses. Also, there are some small instances where a street name may happen, so that's also updated during this process. Addresses also are CAS certified. That's very important when you go to mail. Most mail houses will require the mail list to be CAS certified. And what CAS stands for is Coding Accuracy Support System. And it basically evaluates the quality of the address, and it corrects and matches for the street address, the zip +4, and the carrier route. So being CAS certified reduces the mail time by reducing the amount of undeliverables, the amount of mail that cannot be sorted, and identifies address types that need extra effort to determine proper delivery. So with these two processes, it helps eliminate some of the undercoverage as well as make it more efficient. So for simplified addresses, and these are addresses that receive no mail service, before the 911 conversion campaign, the count of simplified addresses was about 10 million. But since that campaign wanted to make all addresses locatable for emergency response, that 10 million has now dropped to about 100,000. So in terms of the makeup of addresses in the country, they used to represent around 7%. Now it's 0.07% of the addresses. In addition to the certification processes that the post office runs, we at MSG also do further resolution by utilizing commercial databases where we do have information on some addresses in a carrier route that has been deemed simplified. So we're able to augment some of those hundred-some thousand that are still unlocatable. Another component of the postal file is a USPS NOSTAT file. This file contains a list of all addresses not currently receiving mail. These are addresses that have been demolished, new construction that has not been built yet, and it also contains drop units within a drop point, which is a very unique multi-dwelling type, which we will discuss further in the coming slides. So the makeup of the CDSF frame, about 94% are the main addresses that are locatable and mailable. And then the NOSTAT file that's not mailable makes up about 6%. Even though they're not mailable, they are locatable and can be utilized for door-to-door survey administration, for in-person survey. So these are the basic address classifications in the USPS file. They're either designated as business, central meaning post office, a commercial mail receiving agency, which is like your UPS or mailbox, etc. Curbside delivery is the normal city style where you get mail delivered to your mailbox. Educational are identified as off-campus housing. Neighborhood delivery collection box. Sometimes you'll see neighborhoods where you see a cluster of boxes at the entrance of the neighborhood, and they all go and receive their mail there. Those percentages are also very low. Seasonals are vacation homes or second homes that receive mail only during a specific time of the season. Throwbacks are city-style addresses, but they prefer to get their mail forwarded to a PO box. So they're technically in the frame twice because there's really no way of connecting the city-style address to the PO box. And lastly are vacant. So these are homes that have been vacant for 90 days or longer. So these can be flagged as well. As Mansour mentioned, this is a USPS file, so it is zip code based. So in terms of zip code, you have your 5-digit zip code, which identifies your mayor area. Then the zip +4 that's appended to the zip code. The first 2 digits is a zip sector that identifies a group of streets. The last 2 digits is a zip segment that identifies the side of a street. On the right here, you'll see some charts. As you can see, the population in individual zip codes is steadily increasing. In 2000, it was close to 7,000. Today in 2020, it's almost 8,000. In addition, zip codes can be classified in various groups. The lion's share, 75%, are for general delivery, which is all the residential mailing, and about 20% is PO box, and the remaining military is 1%. And then there are areas that are solely business complexes, and that makes up about almost 5%. But as Mansour mentioned, it is zip code based. However, MSG does append census geography, making it a useful sampling frame. So here are the data elements that we bring from the CDSF into our ABS frame. So the column on the left, it pretty much breaks down the various parts of an address. The column on the left are additional postal variables that we get. A carrier route is a route a single mail carrier delivers mail. All the delivery point information just verifies the location, and this is using the zip code and the zip +4. And at the bottom, we have the address types we just went over. In addition to that, in terms of PO boxes, there's a flag to flag the PO boxes that are deemed as the only way of getting mail, meaning that person receives mail no other way. And the last thing, the walk sequence, is the actual route a carrier would take on his route. So this is useful for, again, door-to-door or in-person surveys to come up with an effective walking route to conduct the surveys. This last slide here that I'll be presenting on is basically the address types we went over and their count that they represent. As you can see, the city style makes up 86%, followed by the next highest being the PO boxes. So in terms of the seasonal, educational, and vacant, sorry about that, the vacant, they make up a small proportion. We briefly talked about drop points, but to talk about them a little bit further, drop points are multi-dwelling units that have no unit identifier for unique mail delivery, meaning it's a centralized mail drop-off, and then the mail is distributed internally. So if you were doing a census, that would not be a problem. But when you try to sample drop points, it does cause a problem. So nationally, drop points only make up 0.5%. But in places like New York City, makes up 20% of all addresses. And also in Chicago, there's a high percentage of drop points. So when you're sampling within these cities with high amounts of drop points, special considerations need to be made. One option is the way we have the drop points listed in our ABS frame. We have it identified as a point and a drop count. Rather than showing it that way, what we can do is we can expand the drop units prior to sampling, meaning every unit will have an equal and known chance of selection. Once the samples, once those records are sampled, again, we're able to have information on some of the drop units through our augmentation. Where that's available, we can use that unit information and try to enumerate what the other units would look like. You can also kind of try to get more information on the building type in terms of number of floors and whether they have a basement to try to kind of enumerate, again, the unit information. In addition to the commercial sources we use in our build, we do also go out to external sources to get additional augmentation information. One useful file for that has been the registered voter file. So there are ways we can do special sampling methods for drop units. So this is what this chart shows. So I'll hand it back over to Mansour so he can tell you how now we take this frame and make it into a bona fide sampling frame.
Thank you, Ashley. So as you have seen, the delivery sequence file is fairly nuanced, and the various indicators that are in this file identify different delivery points and many features that are basically, again, useful for mail delivery. And again, this is not a database that in its raw form would be usable for complex designs. But then why are we talking about ABS? We are talking about ABS because as those of us who are in the survey research field know, for a couple of decades, we have been struggling with traditional methods for various reasons. including evolving coverage problems associated with these traditional methods, particularly phone-based method, and specifically the good old random digit dialing. And because of the coverage issues, the sampling and weighting procedures that have been in place for these methods have become fairly indecisive and fuzzy. And then to top it off, again, as you all know, non-response is becoming a more and more serious problem as response rates are diminishing. And these are some of the reasons that traditional methods have been having issues. And it is in this context that researchers are now getting excited about methods of survey administration that relies on multiple modes for data collection. Multi-mode methods can improve coverage, they can boost response rates, and if they are done efficiently and cleverly, they can actually reduce cost. And it is in this context that address-based sampling shines as an effective platform for design and administration of surveys, except not using the raw delivery sequence file, but rather taking that database of mail delivery and enhancing it by appending all kinds of geodemographic information and various contact information beyond mail, so that multimode options become open for survey research. So in a nutshell, this is what MSG does. By taking the raw computerized delivery sequence file, which currently contains about 145 active residential addresses. And in the first place, every single address is geocoded to a unique latitude and longitude. And this is where the magic happens. By having the lat long for each address, then we can merge on to the delivery sequence file all the geographic and demographic information that is available from the census data sources. On top of that, various ancillary data are brought in from commercial sources. As Ashley mentioned, we can remove some of the simplified or resolve some of the simplified addresses, although these days they account for less than 0.1%. And then another challenge is the drop points where mail is delivered to a central, or rather, think about it in terms of a gated community, to the gate, but the exact address beyond the gate is not known. By relying on commercial sources, we can identify the exact address for some of those drop points. And this is how the so-called ABS frame is constructed from the basic delivery sequence file. And this process gets repeated every month so that every sample that is selected from our ABS frame is based on the most current information. So again, delivery sequence file is a postal entity and it's zip-based. Postal Service does not talk to census, if you will, and therefore all the census delineations are not native and available on the delivery sequence file. And again, through that geocoding that MSG does, we make it possible for all the delineations from the census, from the nation down to regions, divisions, states, counties, census tracts, block groups, and blocks be appended to each address, so that for selection of samples, researchers have surgical accuracy for selection of the sample, again, down to the blocks. So this slide shows the topology of the census geography. And as you see, it can get fairly detailed. In terms of some trivia about the census geography, very quickly, counties are local governments below state. There are currently about 3,100 counties in the US, and they vary quite a bit in size. For example, while on average the population of a county is 100,000, Los Angeles County has 10 million residents, and Loving County in Texas has only 169. Furthermore, Louisiana is divided into parishes and not counties, and Alaska is divided into boroughs. Below counties are tracts, and tracts are geographic entities that follow visible features. They typically cover between 2,500 to 8,000 residents, and the tracts are supposed to be homogeneous in terms of characteristics of the households, and they are subdivided into census block groups and blocks. So what is a census block group? It's the smallest geographic unit for which the Bureau publishes data. Currently, there are about over 211,000 census block groups in the US. On average, they contain about 3940 blocks. They generally include about 600 to 3,000 individuals with an optimal average of about 1,500. And then census block groups obviously are partitioned into census blocks. These are typically bounded by streets, roads, creeks, or other features. And including Puerto Rico, there are currently over 8 million, to be exact, 8,200,000 census blocks. But many of these blocks are not residential. Actually, there are almost 3 million blocks that have zero population in the US. And we can obviously identify these blocks and exclude them from sampling so that you do not include them as your sample. So the way let me provide a little bit more detail about how all the marriage of public and private data occurs at the MSG. So on the census side, we take advantage of the summary file, the latest summary file, which is the only source that provides data down to the census block level. And then, of course, it has a myriad of tables that include geodemographic information that will be used and appended to the delivery sequence file. Another census source is the American Community Survey, which is an annual survey covering over 3.5 million addresses. The 5-year aggregate of ACS provides information at the census block level. And a number of commercial databases that we use, most notably is Claritas PopFact database. This is the only database that provides information at the zip level and DMA level in case your studies are going to have a geography that is defined based on a cluster of zip codes, or in case they include a particular set of DMAs. The Claritas source is used to provide demographic information for these geographic entities for design, and more importantly, weighting that we will talk about later. And of course, as Ashley mentioned, we tap into several specialty databases to retrieve very nuanced information about households, such as if there are any particular ailments that you're interested in and want to target households with individuals suffering from various ailments, different behavioral indicators, preference indicators, as well as registered voter information that is often used for political polls. In terms of mode of contact, as mentioned earlier, one of the beauties of address-based methodology is that it provides a platform that not only provides complete coverage, but it also allows for multiple modes of contact. Obviously, having the mail address, one can contact households based on regular mail. We can append names and various household characteristics for refinements. We are also able to append email addresses to about 40% of the available addresses. And in many cases, we have multiple emails per each unit. And then on top of that, there is availability of phone. About 55% of addresses can be matched to a listed telephone number, and a good chunk of these numbers are cellular numbers that can be attached to an address. A few years ago, it was nearly impossible to obtain any cellular number for addresses, but by working with various databases, we are now able to retrieve a sizable number of cell phones and attach them to addresses. And then lastly, there are other databases that we have access to. In particular, there is a major data vendor we are working with. This source or this vendor partitions the entire country into 172 different segments, and these segments classify households based on a long list of indicators so that you would be able to target households based on demographics, psychographics, obviously geography, attitudinal indicators, why and where people purchase specific items, needs segments, as well as purchase behaviors, buying preferences, and media preferences. These are additional indicators that we can append to the addresses in case your study requires targeting specific and niche segments of the population. So in a quick recap, again, we start with the raw computerized delivery sequence file, which contains very little information, and whatever is available is only usable for mail delivery. We append various census geographic information and various demographic information, both from the census and commercial sources. And as mentioned, we can append name and telephone numbers, emails, and a host of other ancillary data so that, again, a simple database of mail delivery is evolved into a complex and comprehensive sampling frame suitable for complex studies. And in terms of sample selection, as a sampling statistician, this is a perfect sandbox for various sampling options. Obviously, we can select a simple random sample across the entire ABS frame, but by default, most of our samples are selected in a systematic random sampling fashion, whereby the entire frame is first sorted by zip +4 so that we produce samples that have perfect geographic coverage. And obviously, all sorts of stratified sampling options are available based on geography, demography, and various ancillary data. One of the unique features and capabilities of MSG is the availability of statisticians in-house that can support designs that are as complex as they can be. Another capability of MSG, again, due to availability of in-house statisticians and survey methodologists, is that we can also work with our clients to implement designs that need to be made optimal with respect to cost and variance and other constraints. This diagram shows the basic optimal allocation that takes into account cost and variance, which has simpler forms as certain assumptions are made. But the point is, we have resources in-house that can help you with any type of sampling needs that you have for your studies. And in terms of survey administration, perhaps the conventional protocol has been that so that when you select your sample, you send out pre-notification postcards to forewarn your sample households that survey is coming. Then after that, when telephone numbers are matched, you can start calling individuals or households for survey administration. And the non-respondents can then be followed by mail and subsequent phone. So this is, call it an old prototype for administration of surveys when the sampling frame is ABS. A variation of that administration protocol is such that when the addresses are selected and the pre-notification postcard are sent out, instead of starting with telephone, you can start with the initial mail out of the questionnaire, and subsequent to that, you can chase non-respondents by telephone or additional mail outs and additional calls to reduce non-response as part of your refusal conversion process. And perhaps more commonly these days, the methodology that is used is that after the initial postcard, the initial questionnaire that is mailed out encourages recipients to take the survey online. The so-called push to web is a fairly common strategy these days because obviously when surveys are taken online, it reduces cost, it reduces data processing efforts, and all around is a very effective and convenient methodology. And of course, having telephone number and addresses, those who do not respond to the web invitation can then be followed by mail, by phone, and other methods of contact. So in terms of weighting considerations, one of the fantastic features of address-based methodology is that because you use a single frame for selection of your sample, selection probabilities are knowable. There is no ambiguity about those selection probabilities, which for other sampling methods, the confusion about selection probabilities it usually results in weighting applications that are very convoluted and incoherent. But with address-based methodology, it can get cleaner and simpler when it comes to weighting. We have known selection probabilities, even if you have applied a very complex stratified design. And from there, the weighting process follows very cleanly and coherently. Moreover, another beauty of address-based methodology is that because there are hundreds of data items on the entire frame, which means those items are available both for the respondents of your survey and the non-respondents, you have the possibility of very detailed and comprehensive non-response bias analysis and adjustments so that the results that are produced from your surveys are as unbiased as they can be. And lastly, I'd like to give out a shout out to our GeoDemo team, which is another point of differentiation for Marketing Systems Group. This team includes a number of seasoned programmers and analysts that are fluent with various government databases, particularly the census databases and commercial databases. And these individuals are those who behind the scene take the delivery sequence file and create the so-called MSG refine ABS frame. So ultimately, in terms of weighting, we will be able to take the respondents of a survey, go back to the study sample, and take the study sample, project it to the sampling frame, and then take the sampling frame and project it to the universe. This path is traversed very cleanly and coherently thanks to the single frame from the ABS that produces exactly calculable selection probabilities. So let me wrap up by reviewing one more time why ABS. Many researchers consider ABS the gold standard for all the benefits that it provides in terms of coverage, having a single frame to work with, which makes the selection easy, the weighting and analytics become fairly unfuzzy and coherent. And again, availability of ancillary data from public and commercial sources provide all sorts of functionalities and nuances for complex designs. Again, nuances that can support complex designs, which unlike some of the old methods, make it possible to select samples that are specific in terms of geography, or even if there are some rare subgroups that need to be targeted. As mentioned earlier, this address-based methodology is particularly relevant because of the situation we are in due to COVID-19. As I mentioned, many government agencies and research organizations are in need of a methodology that can provide measurable and reliable estimates of infection, making it possible for various contact and data collection options, and then having the rigor of a scientific sampling methodology that can provide probability-based samples that cover the entire US, allowing geographic and demographic targeting and providing different methods for contact and data collection, and again, coherent and the very scientific methods for weighting and analytics. And at the end, I like to leave you with a few citations, in particular, the APOR Task Force report on address-based sampling provides many details about this methodology, as well as other papers that are listed here. And finally, I would like to leave you with one quotation from Rumi to ponder upon, especially relevant to the days of uncertainty that we are living in. And one last point is that since this is not a live webinar, we encourage you to contact us if there are any questions. You can contact Ashley and myself by simply going to our webpage, or you can contact any other colleagues at MSG, and we will be able to respond to your questions and assist you with any sampling and survey needs that you may have. So with that, I thank you. Ashley, do you have anything else to add?
No, thanks everybody for your time again, and hope to be speaking to you soon.
Thank you all.